Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 69 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's been far too long. For the last couple Chalk Talks that we did have, I was doing on a laptop that did not work in terms of my webcam. So this is the first time the people are seeing me in a very long time. But, it's week one. I love doing these review shows last year. I think it kind of cleans up some of the things that maybe Eagles fans weren't paying attention to during the 1 o'clock slate while the Eagles games were going on. And me and Shane break it down from the Eagles to the rest of the NFL, and then obviously we do the review or the preview later on in the week. But the reviews are my favorite shows that I do, my favorite podcasts that I do. So very much looking forward to reviewing week one.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling Mark before we started, I watched like 6 condensed games on Game Pass today, and just I'm in football overload. This might be a 2-hour show. No, it won't be. We're gonna fly through it, but we're gonna move at a breakneck pace here. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We're gonna start as we always do with the Eagles-Lions game. We're gonna talk about it some, but you probably watched that game already. Then we're gonna get into all the rest of the 1 o'clock slate. We're gonna get into the afternoon games, the Thursday night game, all of it. We're gonna talk about it all. Tell you guys everything that you need to do. But let's kick off with the Eagles at the Lions. The Eagles go into Detroit and they emerge with a 38-35 victory. It wasn't always pretty. It was at times in question, but the Eagles come out with a win. They are 1-0, and not every team can say that. So, Mark, what were some of your big takeaways from this game?
So a lot of this kind of is going to have to go back. I'm going to have to talk a little bit about my opinions on the Lions to talk about what my opinions are on the Eagles. I think there's a lot of people out there that think the Lions are going to be really improved this year and think that, the Lions are going to be a team that wins 8 or 9 games or 8+ games and goes over that 7 win total that they were set at in the preseason. I don't feel that way about the Lions. So I am pretty down on the Lions, especially with the fact that they were missing key pieces on the offensive line in that matchup. I think we saw that their defense can't stop a nosebleed. And I think we saw the limitations of what Jared Goff is at quarterback at certain points of that game. But they still hung with us and made it a situation at the end of the game where we needed to convert a first down, or else we were giving them a chance to tie or win the game. And in my opinion, with the roster and talent that the Eagles have, and with everything that they added from the team that beat the Lions 44-6 last year, for them to allow the Lions to hang around in a game like that, even though it's on the road, even though it's week one, I think there's a lot of valid concerns. So I probably come out of week one, even though, we got the win. We're one of 16 teams that got a win, but there was a tie. So one of 15 teams that got a win. I probably feel worse about the Eagles right now than I did going into the game in week one. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And granted, I won't say I wasn't buying into the hype. I was trying really hard to be realistic and fight against buying into all the hype. And it's week one, and weird things happen in week one, and we certainly saw that all over the NFL, and we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. I think anytime you can win a week one game, especially on the road, you take that, and you're happy with that. Now, there's things that you're going to want to clean up, and there's some valid concerns that were raised by this game. Ultimately, 2 days later, I look at it as they were playing in front of a sold out crowd, which the Lions don't do often. There was a lot of energy to go on the road in a tough environment, and it's not against the best team, but a tough environment in a first game that you knew was going to be sloppy because of lack of preseason reps. I'm glad they got out with the win. I have some concerns, and I'm sure we're going to talk about those, but overall, I don't feel too upset because of it's a win. But like you said, you don't convert that 3rd and 1 and the Lions go drive down and win the game, we're having a whole different conversation.
Yeah, it would definitely be an entirely different conversation if that's what happened. And, I think we can just start. I think it'd be apropos to start with the tweet that Shane had yesterday. That definitely went crazy on Eagles Twitter. about Jordan Davis. And, I don't know if you have the tweet handy if you want to pull it up. Yeah, I can't pull it up on the StreamYards anymore, but if you want to pull that up so I'm not butchering the actual stats. But basically, when Jordan Davis is on the field, we stop the run. When Jordan Davis is off the field, we don't. And the problem is Jordan Davis was off the field far more than he was on the field. And that's going to open up an entirely annoying can of worms of a discussion that I guess we can have right now. And I guess we can talk about it, but I think it's going to be something that we talk about all the time going forward with Jordan Davis. In my opinion, what's going to continue to happen is Jordan Davis is going to be elite at stuffing the run when he's on the field. That's exactly what he is, and we all knew that when they drafted him. Now, there are some people who are a little bit more bullish on him to become a pass rusher than I am, or than other people are out there. Yeah. So here's the tweet. The Eagles allowed 2.9 yards per carry when Jordan Davis was on the field. They allowed 10.0 yards per carry when he was off the field. Nice little Chalk Talk plug there below as well. But
that was dumb. Okay, so I had a few things go viral last year. Nothing like this. This was insane. Little window into my life. I do math tutoring on Monday and Thursday mornings for 3 hours. I got done with the workout, fired that tweet off, and went to go do math tutoring. And I walked out 3 hours later to 100 plus Twitter notifications and 200 new followers. And I was like, what just happened? And then I had told myself the next time something goes viral, I'm going to do the thing everybody does and add a second tweet to the thread plugging Chalk Talk. And I totally forgot about it until later that night. And so I was so mad at myself. But anyways, go ahead.
No, that's great. That's great. I've had the one crazy viral. I've had a couple tweets have pick up traction, but the one crazy viral tweet about my girlfriend and the undefeated streak with the Sixers that ended very poorly. So I definitely know what you mean about putting your phone down and then coming back and be like, wait a second, what's going on Twitter? It's a funny little thing, but the Jordan Davis conversation is going to be something that I think we have weekly. And I don't I'm struggling with where to go with the conversation. What do you think going forward is going to be the Eagles' usage of Jordan Davis? Jonathan Gannon came out with a quote today, not all that emphatic about playing him anymore necessarily. Maybe I'm misreading that, but I guess what would be your read on the situation?
I'm trying to decide if I want to go off on Jonathan Gannon now or later. I'll say
I think it's later.
Time. It's time. Okay, Jonathan Gannon, he put together one of the most moronic game plans I've ever seen. And yes, he's not the guy that drafted Jordan Davis. And we can talk about how you decide to draft him in order. But the fact of the matter is, you're playing a Lions team that has a quarterback named Jared Goff. And you're sitting in two high shells in nickel personnel against two tight end sets. And they were running a ton of condensed sets, so that puts the receivers in run blocking responsibilities too. They essentially have two tight ends and two wide receivers in run blocking. And we've got two safeties, 15 to 20 yards upfield, and we're sitting in nickel personnel with pass rushers at defensive tackle. We can talk about how bad the Eagles were at tackling, and there is an element. Would the Eagles' defense have been better if they had tackled better? Yes. Would they have tackled better if the defensive coordinator, the defensive scheme had put them in better situations to succeed? That's also a yes. And so there is too much talent on this defense for that to be how week one played out. And certainly there's players that bear some responsibility, but the more I watched the game, the more I watched what was being done from a schematic standpoint, all fingers point at Jonathan Gannon. He just came in with an atrocious game plan. And to be honest, it looked like he was playing scared of Jared Goff. And that's a terrible sign.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Gannon coaches scared. This is something we saw last year with the defense. And I mean, all season, people tried to tell us that Darius Slay was having a top 5 season among cornerbacks last year because of look at the numbers and look at all this stuff and look at him limiting big plays. That's the offense. The defense rather. The defense is directly designed to kind of make your corners look a lot better than they are and make your safeties look a lot better than they are and take a lot of the onus off of the secondary. But when you have James Bradbury, when you have Darius Slay, when you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you shouldn't feel like you have to like make up and do all these gimmicky things to take the onus off of your secondary. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I've always been sick of the Jonathan Gannon style of coaching, but more than ever, when you're devoting $44 million to Cox and Hargrave basically this year, you go out and you trade up and use your draft capital to get a defensive tackle in Jordan Davis. You have Milton Williams, who I understand plays a different position. He kind of bounces around a little bit, and I understand that. But
you go pay Hassan Reddick big money in free agency, and he had 0 pressures.
0. Did he play? Because I didn't see him. It's like all of these things, it's unacceptable to have 1 sack and give up 6.5 yards per carry to the Lions, who were missing guys on their offensive line. And, oh, yeah, like you said, they have a quarterback by the name of Jared Goff. Like, man, there was a rough showing. It was a really rough performance from the defense. And I think the Jordan Davis thing, people kill me on Twitter because they know I didn't like the Jordan Davis pick. And that's kind of going to be a continuing thing that I think people come at me for. And that's fine. My problem was always more with the roster construction than it had to do with Jordan Davis as a prospect. I sat here right after, even though I was upset about not getting certain other guys or taking him or trading up to get him, all of that put aside, I admitted he was bust proof. I admitted he was an elite run stuffer right away, a top 10 run stuffer in the NFL. My question was if he would ever become a good enough pass rusher, or B, a guy who can stay on the field long enough as just a run stuffer to play 50+% of the snaps. So when we see him with 30% of the snaps, I agree with you. Like I said before, I'm not a Gannon guy. I think he did a bad job. And I think there's no doubt that Jordan Davis should have at least had some more snaps. But I also do think there's an element to the fact that we kind of knew what we were getting into with Jordan Davis. We kind of knew that this was not a guy who was going to play more than 50% of the snaps. Now, 30% is a lot different than 50%. So I understand that there's, he can play 40% next week, and I think people will still be upset that he didn't play more. But the problem is we don't know what his ceiling in terms of what he's going to eventually be playing, even if he's like the true starter and there's no Fletch, there's no Hargrave, there's no Milton Williams, there's no Marlon, all that stuff. I just don't know if this is a scheme thing or if this is a Jordan Davis issue. And it kind of goes back to the same conversations we had about him as a prospect at Georgia. It's like, was he playing 37% of the snaps strictly because Georgia had the best defensive line of all time and had 4 first-round picks or whatever you want to say? Or was it a Jordan Davis issue in some capacities because he played 37% of the snaps, Travon Walker played 56% of the snaps. And I know Mike Kay came at me on Twitter today and said they play different positions. I understand that. But defensive line rotations are defensive line rotations. And I understand he's not going to play third down. 37% isn't just missing third down. So I do question whether or not Jordan Davis will ever be the type of guy that can play 50% of snaps. Is that a fair question to raise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question to raise until he does it. And going back to the roster construction thing, like that's why you don't bring Fletcher Cox back and pay him $14 million. And like it has to be moving forward. If Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave are on the last year of their deals, they combined for $44 million off of the cap. They did nothing in this game. And like Jordan Davis may not be able to rush the passer. Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox didn't rush the passer either. So I would rather get him out there more and get him some reps because he's got to grow into that role because you're not bringing both of those guys back. And you could make a solid argument neither one should be brought back. And so, I don't know. I entered this game uncertain about Jonathan Gannon. I leave this game feeling pretty certain about Jonathan Gannon, and I'm ready. I'm ready for a change. So
yeah,
it's not going to come yet, but I'm ready for a change. He is not going to cut it as a defensive coordinator.
I totally agree, and we're going to get it over to the offense in just a second. I think we should talk a little bit about Jalen, and we should talk about the offense of the Eagles, and we're focusing on the defense. But one last thing I will say, and I think I said this when we talked about the Eagles. Everyone said, I mean, the rallying cry from the whole fan base was that this is Jalen Hurts' make or break year, and Jalen Hurts is, under so much pressure. And he obviously is, and he always was going to be a make or break year type of guy this year. But Jonathan Gannon is the guy in the Eagles organization with the most pressure on him, in my opinion, because I think with the tools he's been given, whether that be with spending more money at the defensive tackle position than anybody else, whether that be going and getting Hassan Reddick to put on the other side of Josh Sweat, whether that be the Eagles having their most stacked group of linebackers on paper in how long? How long has it been
Since the
since
Super Bowl year?
Yeah, at least. So that, and then you talk about a secondary that we just talked about it. You have Bradbury, you have Slay, you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I thought was pretty impressive from what I saw, and I think played 100% of the snaps, right?
I think so, yeah.
That's pretty cool to see on a guy who got here literally like a week or two ago. So that's pretty cool. But having said all of that, we have all this talent. You can't give up 35 to the Lions. You can't give up 6.5 yards per carry. It just can't happen. So whether that be playing Davis more, whether that be moving the corners up a little bit, whether that be blitzing, whatever it's going to take, Jonathan Gannon's got to figure something out because the talent's there. There's no disputing that the talent is there for this defense to not only be a good defense, like they should be a top 10 defense. There's no way around the fact when you spend the money that they do on defense, when you have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who they're going to keep the ball away off the field. Like the defense, we're not going to have a defense who's on the field for 35 plus minutes in a game because of the way that we're able to run the ball and to get our defense rest. And when you have Jalen Hurts, a quarterback who's on a rookie contract, that allows you to go and spend more resources on that defense. This should be a top 10 defense run, a top 10 defense against the pass, a top 10 defense in terms of pressuring the quarterback. It should be top 10 in all those areas. So not the opposite of, this is a disheartening performance in week one in terms of the defense. So let's get over to the offense. Let's move on from Gannon. Let's talk a little bit about the offense. And I think we should just start it out with a Jalen Hurts conversation. What were your general takeaways from Jalen?
So my initial reaction, I came onto the post-game podcast for the Painted Lines, which if you guys aren't watching those, you should check those out. And I said Jalen Hurts played a pretty poor game. I've walked that back a little. I haven't got to watch all of the All-22 yet because it came out late. Shocking, I know. But I've seen I've watched almost a halftime in the All-22, and I've seen clips people posted out that got it before I did somehow. I feel like he played better than I gave him credit for. Now, he majorly has a tendency to run from the blitz, and I wish he didn't, but he's always going to. Like, the one play that sticks out to me is the 7-man rush that the Lions brought. I think it was in the fourth quarter. We were down near our own goal line. There were 6 guys in the protection. There's 7 guys lined up across the line. At the snap, they all come. It takes you a half second to determine that. And there's only 6 in the rotation or in the protection. I would love for Jalen Hurts to identify that and say, I've got to hit my hot route, which is A.J. Brown on a slant, and he's wide open. He takes his 2 steps, he hits the back foot, gets it out, it's wide open. I would love for that to be his approach. That's not his approach. His approach, his thought process is there's 7 guys coming. I got 6 blockers. I can beat this guy one-on-one and scramble for 20 yards. Valid, because he often does that. Mm-hmm. I would like to see more of that passing to beat the blitz rather than the running. But I will say the mobility is who he is, and it gives you that certain floor that we've talked about. Is the blitz ever going to kill Jalen Hurts? No, because he's going to be able to run from it. Like slot corner, he can run over that guy. He can run past him. He's fast. And so I would like to see that change. That's just never going to happen. And I don't want the athleticism to be coached out of his game. I thought his ball placement was generally pretty good. I thought we didn't see him work through a lot of progressions because A.J. Brown was the first guy in a lot of those progressions, and A.J. Brown was always open. And so I had people, I had somebody point out one on Twitter where he throws it into a tight window to A.J. Brown, and Miles Sanders is wide open out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm. I think that was Sanders. I think that was Joe Ettinger from the Painted Lines.
Okay, that was in our Discord. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And it's like the thing is, though, he's not playing the All-22 view in Madden. He doesn't have the sky cam. He has to go through progressions. He can't see the field all at once. And so in that progression, A.J. Brown is his first read. he throws it into a tight window, he completes it. I'm not going to fault a guy for taking his first read if it's a completion. Yeah, Miles Sanders was open, but Tom Brady's not making that throw because it wasn't in the progression. So I think we see things like that. I want to see him work through progressions more, but I also don't want to see him just do it for the sake of him doing it. AJ Brown was open all day, and so I don't leave the game with a negative opinion after watching that of Jalen Hurts. He did not prove the things I want to see him prove in terms of taking a leap, but there's no denying that his legs and his arm were a major part of the Eagles winning that game.
Oh, yeah, I think his legs absolutely won them the game. I think I can look at that and say that while also on the other end being like, man, there were some plays where there was some concerning reads and there was some concerning throws. And my brain kind of goes back to the Devonta Smith pass interference. And I know that, the ball, where the ball's supposed to go is changed by the fact that Smith was interfered with, but Smith was still able to kind of clear the guy and get to his route there and get to his spot. And that was a duck from Hurts. And he was under pressure on that throw, I think, but it was short and it was like, and it didn't matter. We got the PI, yada, yada, yada. But that's a play where if that ball was on the money, Smith might have went like 30, 40 yards there. So that there is a difference between the PI and kind of the upside of what could have happened on that play if the ball was where it needed to be. That's one that jumped out to me. The other one that you mentioned that Joe pointed out, that jumped out to me live. I remember noticing that Miles was kind of right there wide open. And I think you made a good point by saying that he obviously doesn't have the Madden cam. And also, if he throws that ball to Miles and then someone converges on him, he threw it behind he would have been throwing behind the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 4. So there's always going to be a crowd of people that wants every pass thrown on 3rd down to be past the sticks. So people would not have been happy if that wasn't converted, even though he looked wide open. So that's just one thing I'll say about that. I don't walk out of week 1 more confident that Jalen Hurts is the guy in week 1 next year. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. To me, this game didn't move the needle there. And
I agree.
I don't think it's, he played like 6 snaps in the preseason, and the Lions put him in a position where his best course of action was to run a lot. And I would say he didn't really have a lot of opportunity to sit in a pocket and go through reads. He was under pressure a lot. And so, I'd like to see him respond to pressure differently. That's just not who he is. And there's a lot of quarterbacks that are like that as well. So it's not just a Jalen Hurts thing. So I'm anxious to see in week 2 against the Vikings, and we'll get to that later, but a team that does not blitz very much, how they're going to handle that. We've got Al chiming in on Facebook, says the O-line play had me scratching my head. I blame some coaching calls. I thought the offensive line, Mark, I'll get your take on this. I thought the offensive line started the game rough. I thought they smoothed out and played a pretty good game. I thought a lot of the pressure was overload blitzes, and honestly, a lot of it was backs incorrectly picking up blitzes. I didn't think the O-line played bad after that initial kind of got shock and awed, and then I thought the O-line play actually was pretty good. I just thought Detroit was sending the house a lot.
Yeah, I'm always going to kind of defer to you a little bit on the offensive line stuff, but just from my eye on it, I thought the tackles played great. I thought Mailata and Lane, I thought the pressure was either coming from the inside or it was a design blitz. And if it's a design blitz, that's not on the O-line. And I get that there's pickups and all that stuff, but that's on Jalen. If there's a blitz and it's getting after Jalen, it's on Jalen to either get the ball out, like you said, to its hot route right away, or do what he did and get out of the pocket and move and go run for a first down. So I put a little bit less of that on the offensive line in general because I think, that's what happens when you blitz. That's the risk you take when you blitz as a defense. So, it certainly was not on my top 5 list of concerns from this game, the offensive line. And I walk out of this game still feeling that the Eagles have a top 3 offensive line in the NFL. So I think they'll be fine next week against Minnesota. We'll talk about that game a little bit more later on in the week. I'm very concerned about it, but what I will say is something I'm not concerned about is our O-line being able to handle their D-line and pass rushers. That is not high on my list of concerns this week going against the Vikings.
And I will say my last thing on the offense is you saw in this game how the addition of A.J. Brown, I think, opens up the running game so much because I go back to, the 54, 55-yard completion, whatever it was, where they stack the box. They've got one high, and you've got A.J. Brown on the outside. And it was just a beautiful play. Hurts hits his back foot, loads up. He delivers an on-target pass to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown did a phenomenal job on that route. Like, you can watch him. He just it's like he slows up like a half a step to initiate contact, where that corner gets on his back, and then he accelerates back out. He shows the hands late. Just perfect job by A.J. Brown. Great ball by Jalen Hurts. You want to load up the box. You want to say, we're not going to let the Eagles run game beat you. That means A.J. Brown is one-on-one. And A.J. Brown one-on-one does not have to be open to throw the ball up. And Jalen Hurts has that chemistry with Brown. And so I think Brown does a lot to prevent teams from doing what Tampa did last year in the playoff game, which is stacking all those guys in the box, because the Eagles have a guy that can win those one-on-one balls now. Not that Devonta Smith did a poor job of that last year, but you don't look at Devonta Smith. He's a small frame guy. He's not a guy that you want to be throwing jump balls to. That's not his game. And he did it. It's not his strength. That's A.J. Brown's strength. And I think it's going to open up a lot of things there.
And just a quick point on A.J. Brown here. And I know this isn't a fantasy football show, but there was a very clear top 7 drafted in top 7 receivers this year drafted in fantasy leagues. And, it's Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, and Tyreek Hill. In whatever order, jumbled them up. Those were the top 7 that went in every fantasy draft. And then after that, it was kind of like pick your own flavor. Like, I was really high on Deontay Johnson. I was really high on Mike Evans. Those were my next 2 guys. It's becoming clear to me that in terms of fantasy, that top 7 should have been a top 8, and A.J. Brown should have been included. I mean, if you're looking at the target share he got in week 1, you're looking at how focused Jalen Hurts was on whatever A.J. Brown was doing on the field. He is going to be the most important part of this offense, even beyond Hurts, I think. So I think it can't be overstated how huge of an addition A.J. Brown was. And just another throwaway on fantasy kind of stuff here on the Eagles. On the flip side of that, I think we also saw that with the targets that A.J. Brown's going to get and with the limitations that you have with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, I'd be hard-pressed to see Devonta Smith or Dallas Goedert having a great statistical season this season to help fantasy owners. And that's coming from someone who owns Smith in one of his bigger leagues. So I have some concerns there in terms of, is Jalen going to lock too much in on A.J. Brown in games that are against more talented secondaries and more talented defenses? I hope not, because I think what having A.J. Brown should do, more than getting 100-plus yards every game for A.J. Brown, it should open things up for Smith and Goddard. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see going forward in the next couple games. And just one last thing I'll say before we move on from the Eagles. Miles Sanders, I've long been a detractor. I've long been a guy who was hoping for more Gainwell work, hoping for more Boston Scott work. Miles Sanders was fantastic in this game, in my opinion. I thought he picked up extra yards. He fought on the ground. He ran straight. He didn't dance too much in the backfield. He didn't make any stupid mistakes and running out of bounds when you're trying to waste clock. He didn't do anything that was like, what are you thinking? I was really, really impressed with Miles, and that's the type of game where maybe I was completely wrong on him from a fantasy perspective and from a real-life perspective coming into this season.
Yeah, it was definitely a really good game for Miles Sanders. One more comment here from Al, and then we'll throw it over to the Thursday night game. He said he wasn't worried about the O-line so much, worried that the adjustments weren't made for that overload, and that was certainly a valid concern. And I think that's once those adjustments started to be made, you saw the O-line talent kind of pull through there. So,
and one last thing on the Eagles, I have NFL Network here on in the background. They do their power rankings show. By the way, everyone check out Shane Haff's power rankings that he does every week on the Painted Lions. And every week he'll throw them in the Discord, and I'll yell at him for some rankings like I did earlier on today. But Dan Hansis is a guy I really like from the Around the NFL pod. He does it for the NFL Network. Where do you think he had the Eagles ranked today?
6th.
10th. He had the Eagles ranked 10th. The Bengals were 9th. We're ranked behind a team that just lost to Mitch Trubisky at home. I think that's egregious in my opinion. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's pretty. So yeah, our power rankings better than Around the NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's throw it over to the Thursday night game where the Buffalo Bills went into Los Angeles and basically played a home game anyways because the Rams have no fans. And the Bills win 31-10 in a game that honestly wasn't even that close. Josh Allen, this is like the final evolution of Josh Allen, I feel like. The Rams dared him to take the underneath throws and execute drives, and he did it. He played the Tom Brady game, and he had to because Aaron Donald was unblockable. And he played the Tom Brady game, getting the ball out quick, executing drives until he had a chance to take a shot, and then he did it. And he burned Jalen Ramsey. I don't know why I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
He burned Jalen Ramsey on that long ball. Just a ridiculous throw off a 1 foot, like 61 air yard. Just a ridiculous pass. You look at their defense. Von Miller had 2 sacks and 3 hurries and 25 pass rushing snaps. Like, he literally beat his blocker 1 out of every 5 times he tried. And I thought Von Miller was on his last legs. I thought he was a good pickup, but I wasn't expecting this. Like, Von Miller played incredible in this game. And this is what the Bills did without Tre'Davious White. With Kaiir Elam not starting, which I thought that was just smoke from training camp, but he really wasn't a starter in this game. It's what they did, turning the ball, 2 fumbles. You had the interception that went right out of a receiver's hands. Then, Josh Allen threw it. So 4 turnovers, and they beat the reigning Super Bowl champs by 21. The Bills looked incredible in this game.
Yeah, they did. And, I went all off season saying, who crowned the Bills? Like, why are they the Super Bowl favorite? And why are we not giving anybody else a chance? And I still feel that way. I still think, like, for people to say that they're number 1 with a bullet and, teams like the Chargers and the Chiefs and the Bucks aren't even close, I'm not there yet. But I think this proved that they absolutely belong in that Super Bowl favorite conversation. And they absolutely have one of the 2 best quarterbacks in the world, in my opinion, very much the second best quarterback in the world. But I think there's a really big gap between number 2 and number 3 right now, to be quite honest. I think Josh Allen's on another level than even Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or Justin Herbert, whoever you want to throw at me, Joe Burrow, in that top 5 to 10 conversation. I think Allen's on another planet from them. Now, there's another guy who Josh Allen has never beaten in Patrick Mahomes that I think is another level above Allen. But switching from the Bills here, is this a more exciting game for the Bills or a more concerning game for the Rams?
Definitely more concerning for the Rams. I mean, the Rams offense was a mess. Allen Robinson was a ghost for the whole game. They have no running game, which is not ideal when your quarterback's elbow is about to fall off and he's going to have to throw it 50 times a game. And their O-line was bad. Like, the Whitworth retirement has really hurt them. On their defense, it feels like they've taken the stars and scrubs approach as far as it can go. And they're like, Bobby Wagner did not play well. He didn't play well last year either, by the way. It's like they thought he would fix that middle level of defense. I mean, you had Jalen Ramsey, who, by the way, allowed a perfect passer rating when targeted, and Aaron Donald, who was winning a half a second after every snap. But outside of that, there's nothing. And when that's all you have, Josh Allen just dissected them. I'm not hitting the panic button if I'm the Rams, but I'm very concerned.
Yeah, I came in expecting the Rams to very much compete to make the Super Bowl, to win the NFC yet again. I'm not there anymore right now. I'm actually, and we'll talk about the 49ers, I'm actually more concerned about the Rams than I am the 49ers in that division. I think, like you said, that O-line was not good, and that's not good when you can't, A, run the ball, and B, your quarterback doesn't have an elbow anymore. So there's a lot of concerning things going on with LA, and just 2 things, like Cam Akers. I said all off season long, these people out there, and I'm sorry that I always revert to fantasy and gambling. That's where my brain works. But these people that were drafting Cam Akers in the 3rd round, did you not watch the playoffs last year? Like, I've never understood the Cam Akers thing. Even before he got hurt last year, people were really excited in the offseason about him. I've never gotten the Cam Akers thing. I've never seen him as the special talent at all. And he's clearly still hampered by this injury, this Achilles injury from 2 years ago now. For people to say that they thought he was just going to be the starting running back and, get the workload. What did he get? 1 carry? He got like 2 touches or 2 snaps or something like that. Darrell Henderson's going to be the guy there, and that's not exciting. Darrell Henderson is as average comes. So I think this is a team that's not going to be able to run the ball this year. And if that's the case, they're going to need a second receiver. And Allen Robinson showed up like the guy we saw last year in Chicago. Allen Robinson did not show up like the guy who was playing with Trubisky for a couple years there in Chicago and was a top 10 receiver in the NFL. He showed up like the non-top 50 receiver he played like last year. I think a lot of people were just like, oh, it's the Bears, and oh, it was Matt Nagy. Like, if you go back and watch last year, Allen Robinson was never open. He just never got separation. He never got open. And that's exactly what he looked like again in week 1. He didn't get separation. He didn't get open. And that's why he's kind of the type of receiver that I always kind of shy away from. The guys who are either not that fast or not that strong or not that tall and able to go up and make plays like a Mike Evans and get jump balls like you mentioned earlier with A.J. Brown. If you're kind of just a jack of all trades and you're kind of just pretty good at a lot of things and you find your spots and you're a good route runner, I'm always going to be a little bit nervous about you especially if you move offenses. And I think that's what we're seeing with Allen Robinson right now.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on into the Sunday slate here. We have the New Orleans Saints going to Atlanta, and they squeak one out. They win 27-26. And I think the biggest story here is just it's another year, another Falcons blown lead, right? Like they were up 23-10 with the ball to start the fourth quarter. They managed to blow the lead and lose the game. Here's a fun fact for you. 3 times since 2020, the Falcons have blown a 15-plus point lead. How many times do you think the rest of the league combined has done that?
I know the stat. It's 2. I know the stat. But it's unbelievable.
Yeah, just unbelievable. So Eagles draft pick watch, the Falcons falconed, and so the Saints start out 1-0. Michael Thomas got off to a slow start, had no catches in the first half, but he pulled in 2 touchdowns, both of them against A.J. Terrell in the fourth quarter to cap that comeback. So this game did not make me a believer in the Saints. And honestly, the Falcons' offense was fun. I mean, it was just as like college-y, gimmicky as you could get. But I think this is what the Falcons are going to do this year. I think they're going to play tough against some opponents. They're going to blow games anytime they get a chance, but they're going to be a competitive team more so than people thought. So that's my takeaway from this game.
The Falcons' offense is unequivocally more interesting than it was last year with Mariota's ability to move around and with Drake London out there, who did make some plays as well. So Pitts, they didn't get the ball enough to Pitts. It's kind of the same thing as last year. I've praised Arthur Smith a ton. I think Arthur Smith's a really smart play caller, and he's going to, Shane knows that I have my head coaching guys that I stand for, like Kyle Shanahan and others out there. Arthur Smith is going to be on that list soon because every time I watch those Falcons games, there's like 1 or 2 play designs or 1 or 2 play calls that I'm like, man, that was cool. Like, that was awesome. That was gutsy. And he had one of those in the first or second quarter with Mariota rolling out and throwing a dime to London, I think. But they are a really interesting team because their defense is terrible, the Falcons. And Jameis Winston had like 58 yards through 3 quarters or through like 2.5 quarters in this game. And then, like you said, they falconed in the fourth quarter. It's funny. I think the Falcons thoroughly outplayed the Saints in this game. Like, I think the Falcons 100% were the better team. And it was in New Orleans. Like, it was a road game it was actually, I apologize. It was in Atlanta.
Yeah, it was Atlanta.
It was in Atlanta. But I thought Atlanta thoroughly outplayed New Orleans. And I think people are going to walk out of this game talking about like, oh, New Orleans found a way and Jameis won in the fourth quarter. I don't know if people watched that first half of those first 3 quarters. Falcons plus 5.5 was one of my biggest bets of the day, which I never really had to sweat. I won and it was a winner the whole way. So I had it probably besides the Eagles. This was the game that I was focused on the most in the 1:00 slate. And the Falcons were the better team for 55 minutes of this game. So I wouldn't, if you're an Eagles fan out there and you're saying, oh, maybe the Saints will be decent this year and we don't get a good pick. I'm not there yet. I still think the Saints are going to win 5 or 6 games, 6 or 7 games. I think that was a bad team. And I wasn't really overly impressed with the coaching of the Saints either in that game. I definitely wasn't impressed with the defensive coaching, which Dennis Allen, that's supposed to be his whole job, is coaching that defense. So I'm not walking out of this game any lower on the Falcons or any higher on the Saints.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So let's roll on to a revenge game as the Cleveland Browns traveled to Carolina to take on the Panthers. They emerged victorious 26-24. In this one, I mean, as we knew was going to happen, the Browns running game carried the day. They're not going to lean on Jacoby Brissett. Nick Chubb had 22 carries for 141 yards. Kareem Hunt added another 46 yards on 11 carries. Mayfield started the game really bad. I thought he fought back. He put up a respectable stat line. They should have won the game. And then, the Browns get down and their rookie kicker hits a 58-yard field goal as time expires. So the Browns find a way to win one. I don't know how the Browns are going to look down the stretch running this sort of an offense. We know Carolina is not a good team, but Baker is denied his revenge game by Cade York. I think he was a 3rd or 4th round rookie. So.
Yeah. Cade York was a good kicker at LSU. It's funny. I had a buddy who had way too much money responsibly on the Carolina Panthers in this game. And I stayed away from this one. This was not one that I had any idea of what was going to happen. And he turned to me earlier in the game in the 2nd or 3rd quarter, because he knows I follow college football. And he's like, Cade York, is he any good? Do I have a chance that they're going to miss his kick? And I was like, well, he's a rookie, but he was pretty good in college. And then obviously he comes out and hits the 58-yarder later on in the game. I'll take issue with one of the things you said. And I know that his stat line ended up okay. I thought Baker was dreadful in this game. I thought Baker was really bad. And it did pick up, like the 4th quarter where he was fine probably. But I think how bad he was for 3 quarters really outweighs the good things that he was able to do in the 4th quarter. I don't think that he got Christian McCaffrey involved enough at all. Christian McCaffrey had like 57 combined yards, which I believe is the lowest amount of combined yards he's had over the last 3 years in any game he's played and stayed healthy in. So that was a weird thing with the Panthers offense. I didn't understand why they weren't trying to involve maybe the most electric player in the NFL into their game plan more. But I guess my overall question, instead of just pouring on Baker Mayfield and the Panthers, do the Panthers stink, or are the Browns going to be a lot better than we thought they were coming into this year?
Got a couple comments here before I answer your question. Fred on YouTube says, because Baker stinks, with a couple exclamation points. Then says, love the show, guys. We got Steve chiming in, says, hey. Appreciate it, Fred. Love having you guys tune in and interact with us here live. It's part of what makes this show so fun. As to your question, I think it's both. I don't think the Panthers are bad. Jacoby Brissett's proven he can be like a 500 quarterback. He's a good backup quarterback. He's not going to lose them a ton of games. In games where their defense will go off and their running game works, they can win some games. And so I don't take a lot away from this game, changing my expectations for either team. I don't see either team as a playoff team. I still see Matt Rule fired by the end of the year for Carolina.
Matt Rule should be fired by the end of this podcast for Carolina. But I'd be surprised if he made it through October, to be quite honest, Matt Rule. I will just say, and I'm not saying Cleveland's going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying that yet. But if you take a look at their schedule, it sets up pretty easily before the Watson. It picks up and it gets pretty hard once Deshaun Watson's going to come back at the end of the year. But man, they have some pretty easy breaks in their schedule early on in this year. I know that they're playing the Jets at home this week, so they're probably going to get to 2-0. The thing that kind of slowed me down, because when I was looking at this game going into the game, I was like, Baker will have his moment. Carolina's got pieces on offense. Carolina's probably got better juju going on in the locker room than whatever's going on in Cleveland. And I liked Carolina initially. And then, funny enough, ESPN tweeted out an all AFC North team, like how we did for the NFC East, or people do them all the time. I was shocked at how many Browns there were on that team. There were like 8 Browns on the 22-man roster on offensive, like a lot on the offensive line. Obviously, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, I think JOK was on there, a couple of the guys on defense. I was shocked at how many Browns were on it, and it kind of made me step back. And I remember I looked at their roster, and I was like, man, the Browns roster does have a lot more blue chip pieces on it than I was kind of giving them credit for. And you saw that in this game with the way that they were able to run the ball, the way that they were able to really dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I think Kareem Hunt didn't have that insane of a day statistically. I think he had 11 for 46. I know he ended up with a couple touchdowns. He looked like, just eye test wise, he looked like Kansas City Chief Kareem Hunt to me. Like, he looked like every bit the weapon that, the last couple of years when you've watched him in Cleveland, he's good and he's had these big games, but he doesn't look quite the same as he was a couple of years ago in Kansas City. He looked like a top 10 to 15 running back in the NFL to me in week 1. And then obviously Nick Chubb did his thing as well. So I'm starting to get a little nervous because, as a human being with compassion, I wanted the Browns to stink and not be relevant when Deshaun Watson came back in week 13. I don't think we're going to get that. I think the Browns will be relevant in week 13 when he comes back.
Well, the only thing that could make it better is if he is the reason they missed the playoffs. So I'd be okay with that too. So
that's a great point.
All right, let's roll on to the 49ers traveling to Chicago to take on the Bears. They lose 19-10, and boy, do I have a take for this game. You ready for this?
It's a Fields over Lance, I imagine.
It's who cares? I mean, this game was literally played in a monsoon, so I'm taking nothing away from this game. Like, they played in a monsoon. I mean, I just don't know. The only thing I can really take away from this game is the Bears pass rush generated 13 pressures with 4 or less rushers. So maybe the Bears pass rush will come alive. Maybe that was a byproduct of receivers not being able to run routes and get open because they were sinking ankle deep in mud. So I really don't have much to say on this game. I can't make any statement. Trey Lance showed some traits, missed a lot of passes. It was a horrible circumstance. Justin Fields had a passer rating of 2.8 in the first half. It was just an ugly game. The 49ers had a lot of penalties and the Bears didn't, and the Bears come out on top at home. So I really don't have much. We can check in on the trade. I do think they're sitting on a powder keg by keeping Jimmy G in the locker room. If Trey Lance comes out and not a monsoon next week and struggles like he did this week, I could see you quickly building into a problem. And I think that is the powder keg that they have built for themselves that they have to sit on now and hope it doesn't explode. But really, I got nothing to take away from this game other than this is a loss that I think we look back on in week 12 and we're like, 1, how did this happen? Mm-hmm. And 2, this may be really, really important for a playoff push for the 49ers. So it's a terrible loss for them in that regard. They should have won this game, but I'm not making any judgments about the team here.
Niners lost Elijah Mitchell, their starting running back in this game. I believe they also lost an O-lineman. I think he might have been a younger O-lineman, I believe, for a while. So some concerning stuff coming out of this game for San Fran, not just the loss. The Trey Lance thing, man, I didn't know there was such a large percentage of Twitter rooting against Trey Lance. It almost feels like there's this large portion of football Twitter that wants to be proven right, that he stinks and you shouldn't draft a D2 quarterback and all this weird stuff. I didn't know that was out there, really. There were times in this game where you watch Trey Lance and you're like, man, this guy's not a quarterback. Then there were times in this game where you watch Trey Lance and you're like, man, that's a Josh Allen type play right there with the way that he's able to escape the pocket and make a throw on the run. So it's tantalizing. He has tantalizing traits. He's not there yet, but let's not judge him on this game. Like you said, it was a monsoon. We'll talk more about Trey Lance next week. He plays Seattle. I think that one's in San Fran. Probably won't be in a monsoon. So I like Trey Lance to bounce back next week. And you're right, though. I mean, it's going to be an interesting conversation with Jimmy G. I guess the question is, if Dallas calls up and offers a second-round pick right now for Jimmy Garoppolo, does San Fran say yes?
They should, just to get him out of the building for nothing else. I mean, but yeah. So, okay, let's roll on here. That one was quicker. Maybe we'll need a few of these to be a little quicker here. But as we tend to do. So Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. This was kind of a crazy game. Pittsburgh wins in overtime, 23-20. At one point, I had an overtime game up on each monitor watching it. It's just kind of a crazy week 1 experience. But The Steelers' defense showed up in full force in this game. They forced 4 turnovers, and they had a touchdown in the first half. Not a good Joe Burrow game. Threw 4 interceptions. He fumbled once. He took 7 sacks. And it wasn't really all on the O-line. Like, if you look at his pressure rates versus his sack rates, he was pressured on 14% of his dropbacks, and he took sacks on 12% of his dropbacks. So he was pressured less than last year, but he took a ton of sacks in this game, obviously facing a really good Steelers defense. Big injury concerns coming out of this game, though, for the Steelers. TJ Watt has the torn pec, although I just saw right before we went on air here that it's not going to require surgery, so he could be back in like 6 weeks. Najee Harris left the game with a foot injury a couple of months after having a Linsfranc injury, but he said he's going to play week 2. So honestly, are we just where we've been with the Steelers for years? This is going to be a dreadful offense with the defense that can play 1980s football and will them to like a 9-8 record. That's how it works now, right? 9-8.
Yeah.
I'm trying to undo like 30 years of knowing football records that wills them to a 9-8 record and a wild card. Like, is that what we're destined for with the Steelers this year?
The shame of it is, it shouldn't be, because you look at the weapons that they have on this offense. Najee Harris is a top 10 running back. I was really impressed with Pat Freiermuth in this game. He was probably the most impressive player on the Steelers offense, just in terms of what I didn't know he could do beforehand. He really made some things happen, not just, catching it and falling down like a lot of tight ends, or like kind of the blocking tight end I imagine him as. He was making some things happen with his legs, getting some yaks. So Pat Freiermuth was impressive. Then you have 3 legitimate options at wide receiver. You have Deontay Johnson, who had one of the quieter seasons in NFL history of a guy who caught more than 100 balls on 170 targets last year. You have Chase Claypool, who's an athletic specimen, and they actually used him as a little bit of a running back in this game. He got 6 carries and was actually pretty good at it. So that's he's not the type of receiver you would generally think of as, oh, you can plug him into the Deebo Samuel type role, but it worked out pretty well for them in week 1. Then you have George Pickens, who they didn't really use in this game, but he was the story of the offseason, really, and one of these stories of training camp and one of the biggest risers in training camp. So they just don't have a quarterback. I mean, we saw it with Mitch Trubisky in this game. He was Mitch Trubisky. He was every bit of Mitch Trubisky, and that's why you play Kenny Pickett. And I know that they won, so maybe they would say that's why you play Mitch Trubisky, but I would say that's why you play Kenny Pickett, because this offense would not have been worse with Pickett out there, in my opinion. He would have taken more chances. He would have gotten the ball in his hands of the receivers. So I think the Steelers are a Kenny Pickett away from maybe this offense being a little bit more interesting, but they're just going to have to kind of, stem the tide while TJ Watt's out over this next month and a half, maybe go 500 in those games. Because if once TJ Watt's back, that defense is top 5 in the NFL, and we saw that in week 1. And as long as that offense can score, I don't even know how many points they ended up with in this game. As long as that offense can score 20 plus, that defense is going to give you a chance to win. So I walk out of this game feeling the exact same way I did before the season about the Steelers. I picked the Steelers to go 10-7 and make the playoffs. And I said, when they do it, everyone's going to be like, wait, how did that happen? Just like it did last year. I mean, it was the same exact situation last year. So I let Joe Burrow and the Bengals off the hook there by not talking about them, but I wanted to focus on the Steelers.
They need to learn from the 49ers' mistakes last year and get Pickett out there sooner rather than later.
Yep.
Because you look at the 49ers last year, the 49ers are in the Super Bowl if Trey Lance starts from week 1, because yes, he would have struggled initially, but likely you play him all year, he's going to give you more in the playoffs than Jimmy G did. Same thing here with the Steelers. Your defense is good. Get Pickett out there. Let him get reps. Let him, he looked good in the preseason. They just need to get him out there sooner rather than, I don't mind if you don't throw him out there week 1 because he wasn't quite ready, but by week 3, 4, he's got to be the guy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that was why I wanted him to be the guy right away. I think I said this on our AFC North preview, but I wanted Pickett to get the job right away because I was pretty sure that this team would be able to succeed with whoever was playing quarterback, at least at the start of the season. So I was hoping that would be Pickett and he could grow into the role while they were winning some easy games. So I really like the weapons that the Steelers have on offense. I just don't like Trubisky, and I really want them to fix this situation and give their young guy that they traded up. Or I don't think they traded up for him.
They didn't trade up. They were able to.
They just drafted him. Yeah,
the guy they always wanted.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so they drafted him in the first, but start the guy you drafted in the first round who's from Pittsburgh and get him in there. So I'm hoping we see him sooner rather than later for the same Trey Lance reason that you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay, rolling on to our tie of the week. Indianapolis at Houston. This killed a lot of survival.
This will be a quick one.
Yeah. So the Colts had a chance in overtime. They missed a 42-yard field goal. They waived Rodrigo Blankenship today, who also had 2 kickoffs go out of bounds. And then into the game, Lovie Smith punts the ball to end the game in a tie instead of going. It's such a coward move. Like, what do you have to lose? You're the Texans. You're expected to go, be the number 1 pick in the draft, whatever. Davis Mills looked okay, pushing the ball downfield. How crazy will it be if amid all of this, he ends up being their franchise guy, but we can monitor that as the season goes on. But I do have a trivia question for you that you might know too. In this game, Matt Ryan became the 8th player to surpass 60,000 career receiving yards. He's the 2nd fastest player to reach that milestone. Do you know who got it faster than him?
So you said Matt Ryan, you mean passing yards?
Yes. Surpassed 60,000 career passing yards.
Is it Rivers?
It's not Rivers.
I didn't see it then, no.
It's Drew Brees.
Okay.
Drew Brees did it in 8 less games than Matt Ryan.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I will just say I caught a lot of smack all offseason for saying that I think the Colts downgraded at the quarterback position. Let me just tell you, folks, they very much downgraded at the quarterback position after watching both of those quarterbacks play in week 1. And we'll get to the other guy in a little bit. And it wasn't all perfect and sunshines and rainbows for Carson Wentz. But, man, Matt Ryan's a statue. Matt Ryan is a statue. That guy has a 3 or a 5-step drop, and then his feet are firmly cemented into the ground. I don't think you can win that way in 2022. I really don't. I think Matt Ryan, I've said it I don't know how many times, Matt Ryan will never quarterback a winning professional football team again. So I very much think that this was a sign of things to come with the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. Fred agrees with you. He said Wentz is better than Ryan, no doubt. He also guessed Dan Marino, who did surpass 60,000 passing yards, but he didn't do it faster than Ryan.
And the funny thing about the whole Wentz-Ryan discussion is, like, I'm not even that much of a Matt Ryan hater. Like, I used to defend him back in his Atlanta days when people hated on him. And I'm not even that much of a Carson Wentz guy. I just think what happened this offseason where everyone rushed to say Carson Wentz stinks and all they wanted to remember was the Jags game when he threw for 27 touchdowns and 7 picks last year. And then people want to turn around and say, like, oh, Matt Ryan, it's great to get a veteran presence in that locker room. I thought Matt Ryan held back the Falcons last year, and I thought he made that offense worse last year. So I am just really low on what Matt Ryan is at age 37 or 38, whatever he is right now. This has nothing to do with 31-year-old Matt Ryan when he was a really good quarterback, because he was a really good quarterback for a really long time. I just don't think he is anymore. And he has no mobility, which Carson Wentz had. And I know Jim Irsay hated him because he didn't get vaccinated, yada, yada, yada. But Carson Wentz, I think he would have given Indy a lot better of a chance to actually compete this year than Matt Ryan does.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to New England at Miami. New England drops this one by a score of 7-20. The Pats offense is a mess. 3 turnovers. They had timeouts at inopportune times because the play callers, whoever that might have been on that drive, and Jones were out of sync. It's just a mess. And I thought I was pretty sure Bill Belichick had no idea what he was doing with the offense. Now I'm positive he has no idea what he's doing with the offense. And I got to say, like, it feels a little bit like watching the athlete that didn't know when to hang it up and stays. It feels a little bit like that watching Belichick coach. One of the greatest coaches that's ever played. It just feels like he is in a way over his head at this point. I think if he stays much longer, it's going to severely taint his legacy.
I think I always tend to disagree with that last part just because I think we'll delete these last couple years from our brains in 5 years. Like, I don't like people still talk about Bill Parcells. Like, Bill Parcells is one of the greatest coaches of all time. I don't think people really even remember the fact that he coached the Cowboys anymore. Like, I know he did it for a couple years and he was at the start of the whole Romo thing and all that stuff, but I think we just remember the good stuff when people retire, and that goes for players as well. But the whole offseason, I kind of rolled my eyes at everyone calling the Patriots like a dumpster fire and raising all these concerns about the offensive line scheme change and the offensive scheme change in general, and putting Joe Judge and Matt Patricia in charge of the offense. I always just kind of been, I was kind of like, guys, it's the Patriots, it's Belichick. They won 10 games with a rookie last year. Like, they should be at least as good as they were last year. I was dead wrong.
They were rotating offensive linemen, including their first-round pick, who should have been a fourth-round pick. But I digress.
It's pretty crazy. Like you said, it's weird to see Belichick and think like, oh, do they not have a massive coaching advantage here? Because it didn't seem like they did in week one. And, Tyreek Hill said it about Mike McDaniel, but Mike McDaniel's going to need a wheelbarrow for his nuts, because that guy on 4th and 7, he goes for it, and Jalen Waddle scores a touchdown across the middle, and they make it happen. I think that this was the type of game where I walk out of it like, usually I like I said about Panthers-Browns, I was like, do the Panthers stink, or are the Browns going to be better than we think? This is actually a game where I walk out very much like believing what both teams are telling me in week one. I walk out saying Miami is a legitimate top 5 to 10 team in the NFL, or I should say a top 5 team in the AFC, a team that will be there in the playoffs this year. And the Patriots are taking a significant step back from where they were last season. I think that both of those extremes can be true. These are two teams I had the win total overs on. I had props on to make the playoffs. I think, Colin Cowherd does the where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. Where Mark was right, the Dolphins are good. Where Mark was wrong, the Patriots are not good. So that's my takeaway from this game. I am extremely concerned with the Patriots going forward. The Patriots play the Steelers this week, and I know the Steelers have a lot of injuries. I like the Steelers in that game. A little spoiler alert, a little preview.
Yeah. By the way, Tua is now 4-0 against the Patriots, and he's the only quarterback in the NFL that has played the Patriots 4 times and hasn't lost. So undefeated Tua against the Patriots.
I know quarterback wins are not, team wins are not a QB stat, and we can get into all those arguments, and we could talk about that all we want until we're blue in the face. But Tua is 14-7 in games he's finished. That's pretty impressive. Like, I know he's not great. I know he's not what I thought he'd be. I was dead wrong evaluating him as a prospect years and years ago now. But for everyone who wants to just write him off and say he's a duck and say he's, not ever going to cut it, say he's a backup, he's 14-7 in the 21 games he's finished. I know that it's not just the QB win stat, but I do think that it's a relevant thing to point out.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's roll on here. We got 2 games left in the 1 o'clock slate. The Ravens travel to the Jets, and they win 24-9. Lamar Jackson, elite quarterback in the NFL. He's got almost no weapons. Out his top 2 running backs, down his top 2 left tackles. Just wins games. Throws for 213 yards, 3 touchdowns with 1 interception. His adjusted completion percentage, which removes drops, he completed 76% of his passes. On a day with no run game to speak of, they had 8 rushing yards in the first half. And by the way, he had 3 deep touchdown passes. He had 4 all of last season. And so they get rid of Marquise Brown, who's their deep threat, and he responds with Joe Blow out of the stands, because that's all they have at wide receiver. And he threw 3 deep touchdown passes. Lamar Jackson is it. He's elite. The Ravens are stupid for not having signed him yet. I hope he goes and plays somewhere else that will give him talent a couple years down the road when he gets the opportunity.
Maybe he goes and plays for the Jets, the team he faced in this game. But I will just say, moving away from you did a good job talking about Lamar and Baltimore. I want to talk about the other side. The New York Jets are reprehensible. What they're putting their fans through on a yearly basis, it should be illegal. Like Woody Johnson, the owner, should be in jail for putting the product out on the field that they put out. I mean, this was one of those games I didn't have a bet on. Actually, I did. I did have the Ravens -6.5, but it was such a snoozer that I didn't even have to worry about this game at all. Every time I looked at this game, either Lamar Jackson was airing it out and completing a 30-plus yard pass, or Joe Flacco was under siege. There were times in this game where I thought they were going to break Joe Flacco in half. The way that the Ravens were getting through against this offensive line, it was within 2 seconds. Joe Flacco had to look at someone breathing down his neck right away. I don't know if that says more about what the Ravens defense and pass rush is going to be like this year, or if it says more about this Jets offensive line and Jets offense in general. But I think this is yet another regime and front office and coaching staff for the New York Jets that is gone. Robert Saleh is not the guy. I think I'm willing to say that at the start of year 2. Joe Douglas is definitely not the guy at GM, even though I did like some of the decisions he made this offseason. But I think this is going to be yet another failed office, yet another failed front office, yet another failed regime, and yet another restart with a new quarterback probably next year. They do this every year. It was Geno, and then it was Darnold, and then it was Wilson, and I'm probably missing someone in the middle of there that they tried and gave up on. Man, the Jets, man, it's depressing to even think about or talk about. I know a Jets fan, and I think if I was a Jets fan, I probably wouldn't care about football anymore. These last couple of years of what the Jets have been pretty special. If there's any props out there on worst records still in the NFL or who's going to get the number 1 pick, I think the Jets are locked in to the number 1 pick.
Yeah, they looked really, really bad.
As bad, I think I'd argue they probably looked as bad in that game as I've ever seen a team look in week 1.
Yeah. Okay, let's roll on to the last game of our 1 p.m. slate, Jacksonville at Washington. Jacksonville has a chance in this one, but they dropped the game 22-28. Congratulations, Commanders fans. You are on board the Carson Wentz roller coaster now. He leads touchdown drives on their first 2 possessions. And then they don't score again until the 4th quarter after falling behind, and they score on 2 straight possessions to win the game. So great first 2 and last 2 possessions. Total garbage in between. Washington receivers looked good, I thought. Jahan Dotson had 2 touchdowns. Antonio Gibson had 7 catches for 72 yards. Curtis Samuel, 8 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin was largely held under wraps, but he had a big 45-yard touchdown in the 4th quarter. So the Commanders, especially Dallas, who we'll get to, they are the team that the Eagles are competing against in the NFC East now. On the flip side, Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence was under constant pressure in this game. Took 2 sacks. He was hit 10 times. I hoped for more, but it probably wasn't realistic to hope for as big of a leap as I was right out of the gate because the talent around him is still quite bad. Travon Walker, though, had a really nice rookie debut. He had a sack and an interception in this one. The first player to ever do that in his debut since TJ Watt, actually. So maybe he's going to be a future defensive player of the year. I guess we'll wait and see. But the Commanders get the win. They go to 1-0. And Jags fall to 0-1.
You said this in the Discord about Trey Walker, but a lot of people gave Wentz a ton of stuff on that interception. That was just a great play by Trey Walker, in my opinion. That wasn't some terrible decision by Wentz. He's
engaged with the offensive lineman when Wentz starts to throw the screen pass, and he disengages and is able to get over there. That's not on Wentz. That was a great play by Trey Walker. And to be honest, the offensive lineman should have held him if he couldn't stay engaged. You can't let a guy disengage right in the path of a screen like that. Yeah,
totally. And the thing I want to touch on is the weapons. And this is why I was high on the Commanders all off season, is because Carson Wentz, whether we like it or not, is the best quarterback Washington's football team has had since rookie RG3. And then on the flip side, this group of weapons with McLaurin, Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, who even got involved in the tight end position, and Antonio Gibson, Carson Wentz has a better group of weapons than Wentz has had since 2017. So I think that there's an argument that the Commanders are going to be the surprise team in the NFL this year. I had their prop on their over on their win total. I think you're absolutely right to say that they're the number one team that we have to worry about. And I would say an X factor for the Commanders, especially their offense, is Antonio Gibson, the guy you mentioned. I've always been pretty bullish on Gibson as a talent. And I think that's always because I lean towards running backs that I think can help a lot in the passing game as receivers. And we've seen that with Antonio Gibson. But then also last year, we saw at times an unwillingness for Washington to kind of hand over the reins to Antonio Gibson, where they would overuse J.D. McKissick. They went out and drafted Brian Robinson this year. There were all these rumors that Gibson was returning punts and was completely in the doghouse. But now we saw that they gave him a legitimate workload, 7 catches on 8 targets. He had 130 total yards. If Washington realizes that Antonio Gibson is their best running back, maybe a top 15 running back in the NFL, and a legitimate weapon, I think they should start giving him an Austin Eckler level workload like he received in this game with 14 carries and 8 targets. I think that's going to take Wentz and this Washington offense up another level because I think it's going to give him yet another weapon to add to those receivers that I already mentioned. But they have so many pieces to play with on offense there. I walked out of that game. I walked out of this game feeling better about both teams. And I know that there was concerns there with Jacksonville. That offensive line did look bad. It did feel like a lot of the times that I looked up at the game, Trevor Lawrence was running for his life. But I walked out of this game saying these are 2 good football teams. Like I think Jacksonville is going to be a team that wins 7 to 10 games, probably 7 or 8 games. I think the Commanders are going to be a team that wins 9 or 10 games. So these are 2 teams that I think we'll be talking a lot about here on the show.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to a couple teams I don't think we're going to be talking a lot about on this show. The New York Giants at the Tennessee Titans. The Giants win this one 21-20. The Titans jumped out to a 13-0 lead in this game, but their defense let the Giants back into it. The Titans offense didn't help. They scored a touchdown on 1 of 6 possessions in the second half. Otherwise, they only gained 80 yards on the other 5 drives combined. Now, the Giants choose to go for 2 in the win rather than the tie, and I love that. Like, I love that setting the tone of the year, contrasted with what Lovie Smith did with Houston to let's punt it away and tie. And then the other big thing is the battle of the running backs. Saquon Barkley coming off of injuries, Derrick Henry coming off of injuries. One of them looked like he's back in Saquon Barkley, 164 yards and a touchdown. One of them didn't. Derrick Henry had 21 carries, 82 yards. He just didn't quite look the same. So I think the Titans are going to be a bad team this year. I thought they were not a great team last year. Losing A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry not what he once was. And I won't write him off completely off of one game, but there's concerns. I think the Titans are going to be a bad team this year. And I don't think the Giants are going to be a good team, but it's hard to feel bad about what Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are working on here.
It's funny. The analytics actually say like he was too aggressive. Like I think the analytics say because they're I'm not exactly sure of this. I heard this on a podcast. The analytics actually say because there was still a pretty good amount of time left on the clock that you take the extra point and you play for overtime in that situation. I don't know why the time on the clock would matter because either way, you're either going to lose if they go out and score. But it's funny that he was even more aggressive than the ultra aggressive analytics would say you should be in terms of going for it. It always says to go for it basically, but I thought that was funny. Saquon looked unbelievable. Saquon looked like the Saquon that people were drafting first in fantasy drafts a couple years ago. He looked like the guy that Bill Simmons called the greatest talent he'd ever seen at the running back position as a rookie in the NFL. If he's that level of player, then the Giants are going to be better than they were last year. It's that simple. I mean, he's that type of talent. So I think I said it all offseason. I was nervous that the Giants were officially competent. I was nervous that the Giants had people in charge who knew what they were doing somewhat instead of what they've had over the last decade. Now, I think that there's still legitimate drawbacks with the Giants roster. I don't think that their wide receiver room is very deep or talented at all. And then I think Daniel Jones showed big time at moments that he's still Daniel Jones. I mean, the Giants almost threw this game away. They were driving to tie the game earlier in the fourth quarter. Daniel Jones threw just an atrocious interception in the end zone. So I thought that was going to be the nail in the coffin. But then the Titans tightened, and they couldn't move the ball whatsoever in the second half. Now, I will say, Shane Half had the Titans ranked 27, I think, in the power rankings. This team was the 1 seed in the AFC last year.
They shouldn't have been.
I know they shouldn't
Paper
have been. I know, but 27. Wow. I saw that. I was like, man, Shane is the Titans fans are going to come after you, Shane. But
they might. There may be some anomalies in a week 1 power ranking. It just doesn't feel like you can put them ahead of the team they lost to, and I'm certainly not moving the Giants up. But when the only game they've played is against each other. So, I would imagine they move up a little bit. I don't think they're going to be like a top 5 pick in the draft when it's all said and done. But I do think this is going to be a bad football team this year.
It's going to be a bad football division. You're looking at the AFC South right now. You've got the Colts and Texans both at 0-1.
The AFC South emerged from week 1 without a win, and 2 of the teams played each other. And that's hilarious.
Technically 2 teams emerged with a half of a win. So there was one total win from the AFC South if you put together the 2 halves. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to follow. I came into the year picking Tennessee as the team that I thought would win the AFC South. If I had to change that right now, I'd probably lean Jacksonville, to be quite honest. But I think 8-9 wins this division. And I said that all off season that I thought 8-9 was going to win this division. So
I just need him to be good enough for Doug to win Coach of the Year, to salvage my gambling losses from week to week. But
Coach of the Year is going to Kevin O'Connell. You can write that in pen right now.
Yeah. I hope not. Maybe they'll tank. So, okay, let's go to the Chiefs at the Cardinals. The Chiefs just blasted the Cardinals 44-21. The absence of Tyreek Hill might become an issue later. Certainly wasn't in week 1. The Cardinals decided to blitz Mahomes on 54% of his dropbacks. And while you could say it was effective with air quotes, it didn't matter. I mean, Mahomes completed 87% of his passes with 13.6 yards per attempt when he wasn't blitzed. So, yeah, when they blitzed him, it dropped to 69% and 6.2 yards per attempt. But that would still be one of the best marks in the league. So he ends with 360 yards, 5 touchdowns. Meanwhile, the Cardinals offense was just a mess. They went 3 and out in 4 of their first 8 possessions. And George Karlaftis, a guy who you and I were both really high on, was a big part of that. 4 pressures, 2 quarterback hits. He bats down a pass. He had a really good game. And then the last thing I'll say here is last year, Patrick Mahomes had a passer rating of 85.8 against 2 high shells. Teams thought that was the book on beating him. Drop 8 coverages, too high, all that. He had a 110 passer rating against 2 high shells in the opener. So, shocker, Patrick Mahomes watched some film. He got better. And the only perceived chink in the armor is no longer a chink in the armor, and they just railroaded the Cardinals.
Are you aware of Patrick Mahomes' career stats in September?
Lay it on me.
He is 12-2. He averages 329 passing yards per game. He has thrown for 3+ touchdowns in 12 of those 14 games. And he has 46 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in those games. I am having this issue right now where when I hear people give Josh Allen and other top quarterbacks credit, I feel the need as the leader of the Patrick Mahomes fan club dating back to when he was at Texas Tech to remind people that what Patrick Mahomes has done in his first 4 years before this year, you could take any 4-year stretch from any quarterback in NFL history, and none of those stretches holds a candle to what Patrick Mahomes has done to start his career. Those are the 4 years to start his career. And he just lost Tyreek Hill and threw for 5 touchdowns in the first 3 quarters of the game. It's unbelievable.
The same Patrick Mahomes that Cliff Kingsbury couldn't win games with at Tech, by the way.
Yeah, definitely the same Patrick Mahomes that Cliff Kingsbury couldn't win once the calendar turned to October or November. But Patrick Mahomes with that win turns to 51-13 in the regular season. Like, the numbers that you can talk about with Patrick Mahomes just aren't real. Like, they're Madden franchise video game numbers when you draft a quarterback and you change his sliders and you change the ratings all the way up to 99. And what Mahomes is doing, I just don't think enough people are appreciating it on a weekly basis at all. Like I all offseason we had like, who's the best quarterback? It's like Allen or Mahomes. And, Josh Allen he actually outplayed Mahomes when they played in the playoffs last year. It's like, it's Patrick Mahomes. I said this in our Discord today because everyone knows my pick for the Super Bowl this year, my pick for the MVP this year is the Chargers and Justin Herbert. Now that doesn't I think Justin Herbert could go out and throw for 5,500 passing yards, win the MVP, go 17-0, and go and win the Super Bowl. And I'd still be like, hold on, folks. Have we looked at Patrick Mahomes' 5-year stretch now? I just think because of what Mahomes has done over a large sample size now, it's hard to put anyone even in the same class as him. And we saw that in week 1 against the Cardinals, who, by the way, that defense, woof.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be a rough year. Impending implosion in Arizona, I think.
Good thing Cliff got that extension.
Yeah. Good thing. Okay, let's go on to the Raiders at the Chargers. The Chargers win 24-19. Man, Justin Herbert's just such a joy to watch play quarterback. Mm-hmm. Throws for 279 yards, 3 touchdowns. He hit 9 different pass catchers. He loses Keenan Allen in the game, who is now my son's favorite player because we were watching that game together. And he was like, hey, he spells Allen right. So that was my son's favorite player. He discovered one play before he limped off the field. So that kind of stung for him. But on the Raiders side, the Carr to Adams connection was strong, but 17 targets to Devontae Adams might be just a bit much in an offense that has Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. And so that's something to keep your eyes on. Khalil Mack had a coming out party in this game. He had 3 sacks. Mack and Bosa combined for 16 pressures, 4.5 sacks, and 2 turnovers forced. J.C. Jackson didn't even play in this game, and the defense still had 3 interceptions. The Chargers are for real. We've been saying it for a long time. The Chargers are for real, and I can't wait to watch them play the Chiefs on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, Khalil Mack, I think that there was a lot of people out there that made this Khalil Mack's washed up. Khalil Mack's not washed up. If you look at some of the numbers with Khalil Mack and what he was over the last couple of years, he was still really good, and he's still a really huge impact on the rushing defense. I'm trying to find this stat as I'm talking. Yep. Okay, so in 29, someone was talking about how Mack had this huge bounce back and how he looks like a completely different player than he looked last year. In 2018, Khalil Mack was the 4th highest rated edge in the NFL. In 2019, he was the highest rated edge. In 2020, he was the highest rated edge. In 2021, he had 6 sacks in 7 games. So this was a guy where I almost felt like that move was slept on a little bit all offseason, just like I felt like the J.C. Jackson move was slept on. And we saw how good the Chargers defense looked and their secondary looked without J.C. Jackson, who, in my opinion, is maybe honestly, even more than Bosa, he might be their best defensive player. He's a top 5 corner. I think J.C. Jackson is another player who's remarkably underrated nationally. So I think the Chargers showed me everything I needed to see in the team that I've went on all offseason saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl. And it wasn't because of Herbert. I'm not walking out of this game feeling better about the Chargers because of the offense. I'm walking out of this game feeling amazing about what this Chargers defense was able to do to Derek Carr. Derek Carr doesn't turn the ball over. He did it 3 times. He threw 3 picks in this game. That's due to what the Chargers were disguising and what the secondary was able to do, what the pass rush was able to do. He was under siege the whole game. I was so impressed with what this Chargers defense was able to do. And I honestly, you said it's a joy to watch Herbert play, and you look at the numbers here, 26 for 34, 279, 3 touchdowns, 129.4 rating. Watching the game, I didn't feel like Herbert played as well as he can play. There's another level for Herbert than what he played in that game. And I think there's another level for that defense, considering the fact that Jackson wasn't out there. I don't think we got the best version of the Chargers this week. And they handled the Raiders, not easily, but they handled them. And they outplayed them the entire game and had control the entire game. So Chargers did not Charger, and I'm happy to see it.
I'm just so sad that the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Bills are all in the AFC. Like, just put one of them in the NFC so we can have that some combination of that matchup for a Super Bowl.
We'll take it though. The us Eagles fans, we'll take it.
Okay, 3 games left here. Our last in the afternoon slate. Green Bay gets embarrassed by Minnesota, 23-7. It's a terrible start to the game for the Packers. Rodgers is 1 of 5 on the first 2 drives. Christian Watson drops what would have been a 75-yard touchdown. The Packers offense was a mess. They were missing both David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, so both of their offensive tackles. But the bigger loss, I feel like, was the passing game just looked out of sorts without Adams. And it's not time to panic because the Packers are making something of an annual tradition of getting embarrassed in week 1, and they were fine last year. But definitely some concerns there for this offense.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns there, and I'm gonna turn it over and talk about the other side a little bit, though. If you're a Minnesota fan, or if you're someone who has futures on Minnesota, whatever you want to say, I mean, how could you feel any better about what the Vikings did in week 1 to their rival in the Packers there? Fred said, am I crazy to think the Vikings are a Super Bowl team? This is pre-Packers game 2. No, I wouldn't go that far personally. I had them winning 11 games this year, and I very much am on their win total over and their prop to make the playoffs. I still think that they're a little, maybe they're not behind the Rams or the Niners, but I still think they're on another level than the top teams in the NFC. But it's not a crazy take. Like, they could absolutely make some things happen in what looks like a weak NFC. But the defense will be the interesting thing to watch. I forgot to mention this with Miami as well. Miami and Minnesota both had head coaches that were so defensive, masterminded guys who focused solely on the defense. Brian Flores and Mike Zimmer. I was personally even backing Miami and Minnesota as playoff predicted teams for me. I was a little bit nervous about their defenses. If Miami's defense would lose a step without Flores and a guy focusing on the offense. If Minnesota's defense, the same thing with Zimmer and O'Connell. Both defenses looked every bit as good as they did over the last couple of years under defensive-minded guys. Now, it's a 1-week sample size, but if Miami and Minnesota are able to keep the top 15 level defense that they've had over the last couple of years and add an offense that's actually modern and being focused on, like we didn't see that with Miami and Tua over the last couple of years. We definitely didn't see any sort of relationship with Mike Zimmer and the offense, or Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins over the last couple of years. If you can take the defenses that those guys had and put them with actual offenses, Minnesota's a legitimate contender. If their defense played the way they did against Green Bay, they're a legitimate contender because the offense is there. Justin Jefferson, wow.
He had 6 catches for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns at halftime. And that would have made him the leading receiver in the NFL in week 1 if he didn't even step on the field in the second half. He had 91% of the team's air yards in the first half. But I will say, Justin Jefferson's a special receiver. The Packers' defensive scheme was atrocious in this game. They did not let Jair Alexander shadow him. Jair said after the game he asked for that matchup, and they didn't let him do it. Last year, Justin Jefferson was primarily covered by a linebacker or safety on 24% of his routes. Against the Packers, that number was 60%. You're asking Preston Smith to go cover Justin Jefferson and wondering why nobody is near him. Like, just atrocious game planning and scheming there by the Packers defense.
I'm hoping to not see that this coming Monday night. But you saw with the top 3 receivers in the NFL, with Justin Jefferson making what happened, in Minnesota, with Jamar Chase almost, half with Burrow bringing the Bengals back and scoring that touchdown at the end of the game that should have ended the game. And then you see Cooper Kupp, where the Rams were terrible. The Rams offense was awful. He still had 13 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. Those 3 receivers, maybe there's an argument, again, to make this a fantasy thing, but there's an argument to be made that those 3 should have been the first 3 guys to go off fantasy boards because they are just so safe, because there's no way that those guys are going to get held in check for too long. Those 3 receivers are just as good as we've seen, anybody be at that position outside of maybe, Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. Like, those 3 receivers have all the potential in the world to break every record they want to break.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to the Sunday night game where the Buccaneers beat the Cowboys 19-3. The Bucs story was the defense of this game. Like, Brady was okay, but their defense stifled the Cowboys. And the Todd Bowles defense was as advertised. They only gave up 244 yards of offense. They held Dallas to 3 of 15 third down conversions. The Cowboys offense was just awful. Like, missing Tyron Smith and Michael Gallup, they had no answers. Dak looked bad. CeeDee Lamb was held to 2 catches. The Cowboys constructed this roster with no depth whatsoever, and it's time to pay the piper, even more so with Dak injured now. And beyond that, like, the Cowboys' run defense was awful too. Fournette averaged 3 yards per rush before contact, the most of any game in the last 5 years for him. And my favorite stat is that the Cowboys were the only team held without a touchdown on opening weekend. So it looks to be a long season brewing for the Dakless Cowboys.
I want to come up with a segment on this show where, it's kind of copying other people that have done similar segments, so we'll have to find our own way to add a spin to it. I want to cross someone off every week that is not going to make the playoffs. Like, we can just put that in pen right now. I'm going to do 2 this week. One's the Jets. I already talked about that. I'm writing them in pen as the number 1 pick, let alone missing the playoffs. So the Jets, I'm crossing you off. Sorry, you won't be in the playoffs. I'm going to do a second one, though. And this is Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, stick a fork in them. They're done. This team is cooked. And maybe I wouldn't feel that way if it was just the Dak injury. But this team looked helpless long before Dak got hurt. This team, I was having these kind of thoughts where this season might be over for Dallas before it started, before Dak even got hurt in that game. So now that we're going to have at least a month plus, maybe Jerry Jones, I know, came out and said maybe he'll only miss 3 weeks now or some crazy thing on his radio show this week, but he's probably going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. Schefter was even saying it's probably more like 8 to 10 weeks. And I don't see any way that Cooper Rush is going to keep the Cowboys afloat. Fred Burns asked Dak on the hot seat next year. His replacement will be drafted next year. I don't think so. I guess you can make an argument that, like, maybe he's just too injury prone. Maybe that's a conversation we need to have about Dak at this point. I'd still probably argue, like, I'd be hard pressed to call him injury prone. I think it's pretty freak luck, to be quite honest. Dak's a really good quarterback. I mean, Dak's a top 10 quarterback for sure in the NFL. So I don't think anyone should really ever move on from a top 10 quarterback. So I don't think Dallas should either.
Yeah, I think they've got a lot of problems. I don't think Dak's necessarily one of them.
No way.
All right, let's go to our Monday night game, the last game we're covering here for this review show. Denver goes into Seattle with revenge on the mind from Russell Wilson, and he walks out beaten by Geno Smith, 17-16. Is this the let Geno cook game? 17-18 passing in the first half with 2 touchdowns. On the game, he had a completion percentage over expectation of 11.1%. And my favorite is like that one throw where he's like rolling out left and he just like jump spun and like threw this rainbow ball back across the field. Like, that's a throw I make in Madden sometimes. It has no place on a football field, but Geno was feeling it in this one. I felt like Denver's offense looked good. They were just atrocious in the red zone. They had, in the second half, they had 3 different possessions where they had goal to go, and they lost 2 fumbles and they kicked a field goal. Denver had 8 drives. 7 of them went into Seattle territory, and they only scored 16 points. And you're just not going to win many games like that. And that's before we ever go to the 4th and 5 shenanigans at the end of the game. Like, if you didn't watch this game, just to catch you up, it's like a 3rd and 14, and they complete a pass. They get it to 4th and 5 with like a minute 10 left. They run the clock down to 20 seconds, and then they call a timeout, and they bring their kicker on to attempt a 64-yard field goal. So after the game, I'll throw this tweet up. Hackett said he felt they had a better chance of making it from 64 than picking up 5 to 6 yards on 4th down. And I said, I trusted my kicker to do something that's only been done once in NFL history, more than I trusted my $48 million quarterback to pick up 5 yards. By the way, Wilson averaged 8.1 yards per attempt on the game. Like, I would be livid if I was Russell Wilson after this game. Like, Russell Wilson played good. The offense moved. The running back shot them in the foot time and time again with fumbles. And I can't imagine running the ball at the goal line, being a sore spot for Russell Wilson, given his history. And then this at the end of the game. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I think so I do a segment on my radio show every week called Donkey Brains of the Week. Which is a reference to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I do not have my radio show this week, so if Shane will allow me, I will give out my Donkey Brains right here on Chalk Talk. And I am giving my Donkey Brains of the Week to Nathaniel Hackett. Sorry, Nathaniel, you have certified Donkey Brains. The fact that he then called the timeouts after the missed kick was some of the most high school football coach hardo stuff I've ever seen in my life. Like he almost didn't want to not use them so he could say like, oh, I used it. Like everything I saw from Nathaniel Hackett in this game kind of made me question if he's a legitimate NFL head coach. I mean, I saw someone tweet like, is there any worse thing that can happen to like you as a fan base than your new head coach in his first game after, you trade for like a $50 million quarterback, you have all these young talent, you have all these expectations. In the first game, the quarterback you traded for has to go play his former team. And in your head coach's first game, he makes this bad of a blunder that removes any doubt on whether or not he's an idiot or not. Like if you're a Denver Broncos fan, like you think your coach is an idiot now, and there's nothing he can really do to fix that anytime soon.
He said today, looking back on it, we definitely should have gone for it. Like,
that's even worse.
If you need the benefit of hindsight to realize that you should have gone for it, you simply shouldn't be the one in charge of those decisions. Maybe you can be the offensive mastermind. Maybe you can be the head coach. But the decision of whether to go in those situations right now should be removed from him. Give it to some analytics nerd up in the booth that feeds the info into his ear or something. But, like, that quote right there, like, he can't be allowed to make that decision again.
Yeah, I mean, he went on a podcast to listen to. He gave an interview a couple of weeks ago. Comes off like a very nice guy. Even in the interview, though, I was kind of like, is this guy a head coach? And after watching that first game, my answer is absolutely not. And I totally agree with you. I don't think any of these head coaches should really be making those clock management and those analytic decisions. Like that should be something that that's done by a nerd. And by the way, unrelated to this game, the Cincinnati Bengals punted to the Pittsburgh Steelers in overtime with a minute left and 15 seconds on the play clock a running play clock. And the
Steelers get the field goal
with no time remaining or like a couple seconds remaining. They would not have had that ability to do that if the Bengals run off that clock. So like Zach Taylor, me and you, I know that they had that playoff run. They had that run to the Super Bowl. The entire run to that Super Bowl, me and you were questioning at least one decision Zach Taylor made every week. And then when he got to the Super Bowl, we killed him for how he called that game. And we killed him for how bad he coached that Super Bowl. That was a rough week one for Zach Taylor coming off the Super Bowl run last year.
There's a running thing in the Madden community that Madden players are better than NFL coaches at clock management and at scripting plays to work off of each other.
Yeah.
And every time I watch the real NFL, like it's just so true. Like I don't know. But I just couldn't. And you got to feel a little bit for Russell Wilson because like he gets out of a situation in Seattle with a run heavy head coach and goes here and they run the ball on the goal line twice and fumble it and don't score. And then the coach takes the ball out of your hands. I would just be livid if I was Russell Wilson.
Yeah, they let him throw a lot, though. I saw that he threw the ball 42 times, which I think is like the 8th highest pass attempt total of his career. So at least they did let Russ cook. But ultimately, like even though I am really low on Denver this year, and that has more to do with their schedule and more to do with having to play the Chargers, Chiefs, and Raiders 6 times. So I never saw them as a playoff team. I will say the Broncos had to fumble twice on the goal line and completely bungle a late game situation to lose by 1 on the road. So there's an argument that this loss isn't as bad as it seemed for Denver, but maybe it's even worse because it was so avoidable.
Did you hear Gino's post-game thing?
Yeah, it's incredible.
They wrote me off, but I didn't write back.
It's an unbelievable line. I got to be honest. It's also funny. not to get political at all, but Geno Smith and Pete Carroll are both like full blown conspiracy theorists. So it's funny that like that's probably how they bond. They're just like, hey man, JFK, there was a grassy knoll shooter. Like I just think I have a funny thoughts every once in a while, just like thinking about Pete Carroll and Geno Smith talking over conspiracies like that. Maybe that's how they celebrated the game. I will say to wrap up this game a little bit. I guess Russell Wilson stayed on the field for like 40 minutes after the game, talking to all these players in the Seahawks, talking to some of the employees like that work there, which is cool. Apparently, him and Pete Carroll stood basically within 3 feet of each other for a very long time and never acknowledged each other whatsoever. So I think that there's legitimate bad blood there between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. And I think that was Pete Carroll and Seattle's Super Bowl last night, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. And good for Geno Smith. Geno, he never really had a shot, I would say, a fair shot in the NFL, going to the Jets. He's not, and I don't think he's a good quarterback. I think Geno Smith easily is a low caliber starting quarterback. Like there's no way he's not one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And so, there was never any doubt in my mind he would win the job over Drew Lock. And I don't think the Seahawks are going to be good this year. I think there's clearly limiting things with Geno, but I think he can easily show that, he's the 25th, 24th best quarterback in the NFL. And so I'm happy for him. He's getting a shot, and he looked good on Monday night.
Yeah, I was bullish on him to win the job. Like it should not have been a competition between him and Drew Lock. Drew Lock's terrible. At least Geno is like competent and is not going to kill you. Like the thing about Geno, he's not going to take enough chances really most of the time. He didn't have to in this game. He took what was given to him.
He threw 28 passes and he had under 200 yards.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Geno is. Like he's not going to go down the field. He's not going to stretch the field. He's not going to make you pay. But he's not going to lose you the game very often. And I actually thought he was pretty impressive when he came in as a backup last year for Seattle. So pretty incredible stuff for Geno to get that moment. And just an unbelievable line by Geno to say that they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. Good for him to have that ready.
What reminded me of that is I just had a notification pop up that NFL memes tweeted that they wrote off the Cowboys, but the Cowboys wrote back.
That makes me think of the song "Stan" by Eminem. Dear Slim, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling. That's my bad reference of the day.
All right. Well, as we close in on the 2-hour mark, they won't all be this long, but there was a lot of football pinup energy here that we needed to get out. Mark, before we get out of here, do you got any final thoughts that you want to fire off?
Man, I did. Like usual, I don't plan my final thought, and then I'm sitting here holding the bag, wondering what I'm gonna do. I guess I'll just say that last year on this podcast, or not on this podcast in general, last year my football watching attention in terms of my favorite team was very divided because Notre Dame was a one-loss team that competed for the playoff. Notre Dame lost to Marshall last Saturday at home. And they are now 0-2. Their new head coach is 0-3 to start his career at Notre Dame. I will very much be focusing on one football team going forward this year, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles. So my coverage will hopefully be a little bit better of the Eagles since I don't have Notre Dame football to focus on and follow as well. So that's the bright side of a depressing fandom that I have of Notre Dame football.
Yeah. We'll pour one out for Notre Dame, but we'll be excited about the increased NFL coverage, I suppose. I guess my final thought is if you are a gambling person, disregard everything I say and go follow Mark's stuff because I went 1-5 this week. So don't follow my gambling advice. I'm going to tweet it out anyways, and you should probably just bet the other side, and you can thank me later.
I went 6-4. I guess 6-5 if you count the Rams. I went 6-5 in the NFL. But I think I went 3-1 on my big plays, which were the Falcons, the Steelers, the Rams, and one that's escaping me right now. So I believe I went 3-1 on those. Have been pretty hot to start the college football year. So I guess those should be my final thoughts. I'm doing pretty well on the gambling side of things right now.
Yeah, so follow Mark, not me. So thank you for those of you.
Follow Shane for the viral Jordan Davis and snap
Yeah,
count.
I'll get you advanced stats. Mark will make you money. So hey, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, thank you for joining us for episode number 69 of Chalk Talk. Thank you to everyone that chimed in the comments. Good show tonight. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can give me a follow on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. So for me, for Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.